Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 13th Canadian Science Policy Conference, CSPC 2021. My name is Dr. Titilope Adebola, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Roseann O'Reilly Runte, the President and CEO of the Canada Foundation for Innovation, CFI, which is a nonprofit corporation that invests in research infrastructure at Canadian universities, colleges, research hospitals, and nonprofit research institutions. Dr. Runte, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you here.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me.
Great. So I know you've been involved with the CSPC in various capacities over the past. Recently, you participated in the CSPC Career Campus series, where our participants had the chance to meet with you and interact with you and also learn about your very interesting career path. So what were some of your biggest takeaways from this session, and why is capacity building for the next generation of science policy experts something that's important to you?
Well, my biggest takeaways were, first of all, the people that participated were so engaged, so serious, so concerned about the future that it made me hopeful for the future because they were thinking about the challenges that exist, the environment, health, and I know that they're going to make great contributions. So my first takeaway is that we are lucky to have a next generation of really motivated, wonderful people. The second takeaway that I had was that, and it's that education is so important, and university and college education really is instrumental in making it possible for people to make an important contribution in their lives. But it's not just what happens in the lecture room, it's the one-on-one contact between students and each other, students and professors. And it's also the extracurricular activities. For example, there was one person present that had been an instrumental member, in fact, the president of the Environment Club at Glendon College. And he said that knowledge of the environment and its importance had influenced him in his career choice, his life, all the years after his graduation. So education is not just in the classroom, it's a whole experience. And then the final thing was that education doesn't end after 4 years, doesn't end after 6 years. We all talk about lifelong learning, but life is an education. And we are so privileged, those of us who have already graduated, to be able to mentor others. And I always know that when I'm mentoring somebody, I learn as much or more from them as I ever am able to share with them. So I continue learning as well. And it's that learning that makes one face the next day with hope that we can make a difference, and with a positive, energetic attitude that really we will change the world.
Thank you. That's great. It's great that we have people like you taking out time of your busy schedules to really give back and impact the next generation. So thank you for that. So now with the pandemic happening, in light of recent happenings, how has CFI been able to adapt to support research activities across the country and also ensure that Canadian researchers are well equipped to tackle the pandemic?
Well, when the pandemic started, I was really struck with how generous researchers were, that they would put aside their current research and work uniquely on the pandemic, on the vaccines, on remedies, on the tools needed to serve people who were ill. And we first thought at the CFI, how can we support them? Give them some time, make sure that they didn't have to worry about their pay. We realized that they didn't have the tools, all that they needed to do those experiments. So we set up 2 special competitions to provide the tools to the people working in colleges, hospitals, and universities so that they could work to help solve the problem. But we realized when we did that, that what we did was really a drop in the bucket and a lot more was needed. And so we did a survey and we calculated what was missing across the country so that if there ever were, and we hope there never would be again, a pandemic or a similar problem, what do we need in our laboratories so that we would be ready to better serve quickly? And we put together that list of what we needed and priced it, and the government said, we will provide that in the budget. And they did, and they actually even provided more so that we're able to collaborate with the 3 research councils of social sciences, engineering, medical research councils to provide really strong support, not just for the equipment, but for the researchers and the graduate students, and training the next generation of graduate students so that we're ready to do really excellent science, particularly in fields that would touch contagious diseases or infections.
Awesome. That's so interesting. Now moving on to the role of science and evidence-based decision, because we've seen that changing and evolving in the past in light with recent happenings. Now we see how important science and evidence-based decision has been in navigating Canada through the COVID-19 pandemic. So what are some of the key challenges, in your opinion, facing effective science communication to the public? And what do you think could be done to address some of these challenges?
Well, when we look at what to do, usually we say, let's look at history. But we can't always look at history because things that happen today didn't happen in the past, or they didn't happen in the same way. And today we have transportation and communication and scientific ability that people didn't have in the past. So really, when we want to look at how we treat a problem today, history is important, but science is the area where we can focus on to find real answers to the issues that confront us. But there's a problem. And the problem partly lies in communications. There are today a lot of people who aren't scientists and who express their opinion, and it's freedom of speech, so they can, but it confuses people who don't know necessarily if that's a scientist or an amateur scientist who may or may not. And then, of course, there's scientists that aren't all right either, as they're struggling to get the answers right away. Some of them might have the wrong answers and work on it and get the right answer later. And because we were trying to publish everything fast, everything wasn't reviewed. So even scientists reading it weren't always sure that what another scientist said was great. So the scientists aren't agreeing, people who aren't scientists aren't agreeing. And then we have governments. And we have so many levels of government, from the federal, provincial, municipal, and each of them, we turn to them and ask them, well, you tell us what to do, tell us what's good. And they don't often consult each other. And sometimes they don't consult the scientists, and sometimes they consult different scientists. So we get a whole plethora of opinions about what to do and what isn't, what we shouldn't do. And sometimes people even take the statistics and turn them around or misinterpret them. So if 95% of people are vaccinated, well, is it 95% of the people who responded to the poll? Or is it 95% of all people? Or is it of people only in Alberta? Or is it people only over the age of 12? And when you start asking the questions, then you think to yourself, what should I believe? And so really, I think that what we need today are really good science communicators. The best scientists sometimes aren't really good communicators. And really good communicators don't necessarily understand the science and all the fancy vocabulary around it. So we have to have a meeting of grounds. Also, sometimes the scientists are just really busy trying to find the solution. I talked with a number of them. They were doing the labs were open 24 hours a day doing, because you couldn't bring in as many researchers at once. So they did cycles. They were working all night and all morning, and they're very tired. We need people that can understand what they're doing and explain that to the public. We need those people to be able to say to the public, we don't know yet. And it's a really hard thing to say, but it's also a really hard thing for the public to accept. Why don't you know? You should.
Exactly.
And I think if people said it often enough and honestly, and that we trusted them, then that would be a good way to communicate what we need to do. And so for that, we need people a bit like André Picard in the Globe and Mail. I know that when I read his column, it's always going to be reasonable. It's never going to be, too far out one way or another. He's going to just say what really is. We need people like that. And I think there's a role for young people starting their careers to actually pick that as a specialization. And I think newspapers and television and radio, when they have reporters, they maybe have one education reporter, one science reporter. It's usually the youngest person on the team who's definitely trying to get a bigger beat. And as soon as they get kind of good at their job, they're promoted, and you get somebody else that doesn't understand. Science should be part of our everyday lives. It should be in the newspaper, in the media every day, not just when we have an emergency or a pandemic. Why not try and explain to people a little bit about quantum computing? Why not explain every day I could go across the country and show brilliant things that are happening here and there. And those stories would inspire people, and it would be a very good thing for the country to have. So I think we need to have the people that can do it, have the communications outlets understanding that that is an important part of their mission, and that it's just as important to report that as it is to report a car crash at the corner. And let's change the world. And I think we can do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's so interesting. Still speaking on science communication, you've touched a bit on it. But I want to speak a bit more about trust in the scientific community. Now, with recent happenings, and like you've mentioned, with some confusion right now with the general public and some conflicting information even coming from scientists, right? How do you think trust in the scientific community has evolved in light of recent activity? Like this is now to the general public.
Well, I think that science has always had a tough, the scientists have always had a tough role to play in media. Go back and think about Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. It's the crazy scientist that created the monster. There's, Dr. Morneau, the evil scientist, is going to, take over the world. You see it in Star Wars, all of those things. There's always that evil side of science. And then the other image of scientists that we tend to see in the media are the bumbling, funny ones. Oh, look, honey, I shrunk the kids. Or, the one that looks like Einstein with his hair all over when I've got a bad hair day. So, and, the best role that they have are the ones that, the good one that was able to get the Jurassic monsters put back, the genie put back in the bottle. We need to allow and project to the public the image of scientists who are actually normal human beings that really care about the world and show that. And one of the ways that I saw that happening during the pandemic was the CFI. We were unable, usually we go around and interview people and take films of them. And we couldn't do that because we couldn't travel. So we said to young researchers in particular, would you create a little film, 3 minutes, explain what your research is, and just tell people about it. And they were fabulous. They were wonderful. You really understood their work, but you saw them as human beings in their laboratory trying to do something without a professional cameraman or person. It was just lovely. We need that for people to understand that scientists are people. And the other half of it is that there are people that like science. They're amateur scientists, so we call them citizen scientists. We should encourage them because they're going to better understand science and they're going to understand the challenges that scientists face. And we also have to remember that trust is something that you build over a long time. You don't just immediately trust somebody. So we need to build that trust over a long period of time. And that can be done. And it's a project that we can't do in one conference. We can't do it in one film, but we can do it over years. And that will be a great contribution that we can make to the next generation. Contribution, vaccines, contribution, solving problems of the environment, contribution, communicating with people and having the world understand the potential of science and supporting it.
Thank you. That's interesting. We still have a long way to go, but at least it sounds like we're heading in the right direction at the moment. So I
and you're a great example.
Oh, thank you. I try because I know sometimes with science, the issue is breaking it down from some of our technical language and the jargon to things that are easily digestible from the public. And sometimes that could be a challenge in itself. Right. Okay. So just to round up, with CSPC 2021 fast approaching, what are you most looking forward to with the upcoming conference?
Well, there are so many sessions. I'm having a trouble picking which one I'm going to go to. It's a menu of very tempting opportunities, and I'm thinking that I will be interested not only in hearing what young scientists are doing, but what government is planning and what leading scientists who have played an extraordinary role, how they're going to inspire us, how people are cooperating among each other. I saw one session about cooperation and inspiring each other. I think that there are so many sessions that, well, I don't know how I'm going to fit them all in. I need more time in the day.
That's okay. Sounds like there's lots of excitement around participating in CSPC 2021. That's great. Well, Dr. Runte, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you today. Thank you for stopping by. We've loved hearing from you and just sharing some of your wealth of knowledge. Look forward to seeing you at the CSPC 2021 conference.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Hello.